8:30 to 10 to dialogue with you in our quest to make Nevis nice again. Our special guest tonight is Dr. Patricia Bartlett. She's always clinical. For the next 90 minutes, we'll discuss the prevailing issues of the day. And I can assure you, she will perform political surgery. Good evening, Pat. Nice to have you in the hot seat once again.
Hey, good evening, Steve. Thanks for the invitation to join you, and thanks for having me tonight.
And of course, we can't avoid it. This program was preceded by a national address by the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, of course, just back from an official visit to the Asian Tiger, Taiwan, a delegation which included our own Cleone Stapleton Simmons.
Yes, that was quite exciting for her even, yes. It was, I think, it was quite inclusive, and it was very, generous of him to include us at this point in time, us not being featured necessarily on the federal level, so I thought that was, a good thing that he invited her along, and I'm sure that she would have gained some experience from that trip, and so I would just say kudos to her. And thanks to the Prime Minister for being all-inclusive.
Well, Cleone, I know it's good for you to be back with your family, your young boys, so welcome back, and we look forward to hearing from you in the coming days. And, of course, it's a very important juncture in our political history. Tomorrow marks 100 days since the new government took up office. And that is the reason why Prime Minister Jew has been so busy on the media circuit. On Saturday night, of course, he did an interview on ZIZ. Tonight, he made a national address to the nation. And tomorrow, he brings his entire cabinet for a press conference at the Marriott, one of the ballrooms there. Of course, at the same time, it marks 100 days since our three representatives on this side of the Narrows had, of course, committed the biggest blunder in the political history of our country, where they gave up seats, basically handed back their seats on the federal level, and now relegated to the opposition benches. You think we might hear from these three gentlemen that they may come together for a press conference on their first 300 days in opposition, Pat?
I doubt it.
You doubt it?
I doubt it. I don't think it's going to happen. Because it's a peculiar situation that they find themselves in, and I don't think they were necessarily prepared for it. I don't think these guys go into most of what they do with a plan. And so I think they're still feeling their way around as to exactly how do they fit in the overall landscape. They don't necessarily want to oppose, but they're in opposition. It was interesting to see, the opposition leader, following foot on foot behind Dr. Jew, as if he were part of Dr. Jew's cabinet. So I don't know. It's a strange time that we're in, and I don't know that the position that they're in necessarily is going to pan out well for the people of Nevis. But I guess we'll give them an opportunity and see what they deliver. They haven't really delivered much before. I don't think people will be totally disappointed that they don't deliver now, because when they were in a better position, they hardly ever delivered anything. So like I said, I don't expect that. But
well, the Premier has been telling us the elections are over, it's time for governance. He's trying to give the impression that nothing has changed. The ship of state moves on as usual. But anybody who is a political watcher know that, as he has said, the government benches are far cozier than the hard benches in opposition.
Yes, and it seems like that's where he really wants to be, but I don't understand. He has not been invited, to be a part of the government, and so he goes around, and I think at this point he's willing to, shine shoes.
Well, of course, he has his press conference on Thursday, so he has lots of questions to answer. Let's hope that he'll be forthright. Well, in his media presentations, one thing that the Prime Minister has said, in a visit which took him about 5-6 days, his first official visit overseas, he has reported that the Taiwanese has given the commitment to help the government of St. Kitts and Nevis build a brand new hospital at a new location. Our leader has famously said at several press conferences that diplomacy is not about bringing anything back. In the meantime, our hospital here has been painted bold yellow. The Premier has posted the pictures to Facebook, trying a con job on the Nivision people, knowing full well that on the inside it's an empty shell. As the election nears, we begin to see the CCM shenanigans. Have you seen the pictures of the new hospital, Wing?
I've seen the pictures. I've commented on them because I think the first coat of paint went on just before, on the eve of the federal elections. And then at that point in time, I would have pointed out that that is just what it was, window dressing.
Mm-hmm.
They put in some windows on the upstairs, the part that you can see from the road, and then downstairs nothing was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a show. And it's unfortunate that you try to fool people. Obviously, he knows that he can't fool the people in Nevis who live on Nevis, who really need the hospital to be completed, because we need an upgrade in the services that are being delivered to our people. And in the meantime, our people have to travel so far sometimes, just to get health care. And in the meantime, he's quoting a different set of people, not Nivisions living on Nevis, and that is what it is all about, because it seems like when people are instructed to ignore the noise, they just latch on to his, just to his show, it seems, exclusively, and that is where they get their balance, reporting from. And we've seen him, it is, I don't understand how he can continue to parade himself around as this person who is this paragon of virtue and believes, in justice and all the rest of it, but to lie to your own people like that, I can't forgive somebody, for that. I can forget that they would have done it at some point in time, but I can't forgive this. This is just unbelievable stuff I'm seeing. I'm lost for words.
As you said, it's designed for people in the diaspora.
Yes.
Who've got their good city hospitals in the area where they live and don't have to be rushed to Alexandra. And I smile when I see them commenting on Facebook, "Thank you, Mr. Premier. Good job, CCM." But of course, we live here and we know what is going on. But I do find it pathetic that in 5 days, Prime Minister Ju could get a commitment from Taiwan to build a brand new hospital over there. We know we've got commitment for dialysis before, and now we've been struggling going on 5 years to finish the Alexandra Auxiliary Wing. I wonder if he'll have any news to share on Thursday.
As it relates to the
Alexandra
Taiwanese
Hospital, or what he might have achieved on this trip.
He's going to skirt around it. I don't know that he could very well. I think his credibility has been shot. As it relates to the Taiwanese, because remember they would have given him $167,000 at one point in time. That was in 2018, I think, to get dialysis machines for the people of Nevis, and we don't know what happened to that money. I don't know if he has accounted to them, but he has certainly not accounted to the people of Nevis for receiving those monies and what he did with them, because we have not seen any movement towards dialysis. He would have said that he had people in training to operate dialysis machine. Nothing ever came of it, and that was since 2018. How long is it going to train specialist nurse in dialysis? And so I don't know that the Taiwanese is going to necessarily give him anything at this point in time. So whatever we get probably would be the drippings or whatever is running over the cup that Ju would have collected. But I don't see us getting anything substantial. What case can we make in that you go to people and you keep asking for stuff and you get, and then no one knows there's no accountability? And I think that is what is plaguing this current administration. There's no accountability.
Well, you have said that on almost every program that you hear. What is happening at the hospital and splashing paint on it, to me, is another classic case of not accounting to the people of Nevis. I've said on several evenings, and I'll say it again, he has a press conference on Thursday. What he can do is cut the posturing in half and then lead the media on a media tour to the auxiliary wing.
Never happen.
It won't happen?
It never happened.
Well, the Nevis newscast never goes there. They haven't been there for a while. But independent media, people coming from St. Kitts and Nevis as well, he should lead them on a media tour to the wing, since it's so spanking brand new. Let them be the fourth estate and our eyes and ears.
But that's not going to happen. So
It's not
we
gonna
might as well
happen.
move on.
We might
because
as well move on.
We might as well move on because nothing is going to happen there.
All right, let's do that. Now, on Friday last, the Negus Reformation Party held a protest and rally starting at the Electoral office. Fill us in on that.
Well, yes, we decided that the issues that we are facing now, or confronting with now, these are issues that we needed to highlight in the public. We have been speaking about these issues and no one has been taking heed to what we have been saying, and we just thought that maybe some media scrutiny might just, cause somebody to move. We would have written with our concerns as it relates to the staffing or the understaffing of the electoral office here in Nevis. We haven't had a manager here for over a year. At the office is here, right here in Chapel Street, and no one has answered, to the extent that, but anyway, moving a little forward, I think there was a little movement on Friday. Not that, maybe it was because we decided that, and we published that we were going to have the demonstration. I don't know. Maybe it's pure coincidence that we had a meeting, but within recent times, you're aware that an appointment was made for the supervisor of elections, a gentleman in St. Kitts, Mr. Pete.
Oakland Pete, yeah.
Right, so he came over on Friday, and so we are hoping that something would come of it, and they would at least start taking us serious on the issues that, because personally, in Nevis 9 last election, just before on the eve of the election, they pulled a stunt that I could not appreciate, couldn't appreciate it at all as it relates to holding back parts of the electoral list. I mean, how could you hold back the list from a candidate? We need to know what we're doing, and bet you the other side would have had it. So those kind of stunts still happening in 2022. Those things ought not to be happening. We have said that we're agitating for a fair and free election. And we always hear, elections were free and fair and free from fear and all that kind of thing. But for us, it is not panning out on the ground because we are seeing some kind of things happening. For a party that claims and have the level of confidence that they have that they're going to sweep all 5 and they're going to do this and, why are you indulging in these things? And a lot of these things are not legal things, Why are we indulging in these things? And then we boast, But I would have made a post recently, just to remind some people, just to put things into perspective. People going around boasting about the trophies that they have. You can go in town and you can buy a trophy. It doesn't mean the same thing as if you went in town and you competed and you got a trophy presented to you based on the merit, based on the work that you would have put in. And that is what I think is lacking on that side. Credibility is lacking, because they boast of all these wins. But if you're going to cheat to win, what kind of win is that? When we were children, we were taught, these are the rules, and you follow the rules, you play by the rules, and then you can celebrate a victory. But these people are celebrating victories that don't mean anything. There's no substance to the victory. It's just about being there, and it's the same way they operate in the country. The same way. And all this talk you hear, and most of it is just a lot of flabbergasting. It's like people just talking because, let me stop using language like that. But, it's just a lot of highfalutin talk. People are speaking because they were trained to speak, in a certain way. And some people who, I don't know if we sometimes suffer from inferiority complexes in our country, but it seems so to me, we are uniting these people who at the same time doing us wrong. And I just cannot understand how people reconcile that in their minds when you go home. It's like, how could you be cheering for someone who has been using his office in a manner that leads to your oppression, but elevating himself? How could you continue to praise him? And I can't understand that. That is not rational behavior from our people. But I'm confident that we have enough people in the 97% bracket, who would be able to make a change for these elections.
Well, the new supervisor of elections is in an unenviable position. The previous supervisor has gone into the sunset, and as far as I'm concerned, all that we've been doing is passing on a broken system to a new person. We can have an election in Nevis within a month. We don't have, like in Dominica, where Roosevelt Skerritt wants to catch the opposition with its pants down because their leader resigned last month. Or like in Antigua, where Gaston Brown says he's going to bring the elections like a thief in the night. We know, because of the confluence of events where we have had to face 2 elections in, say, 4 months, 6 months, that we're going to have an election soon. It could be dumped on us in the Yuletime season as early as December 15th. How much time does this supervisor have to fix things? Because the incumbent knows there's no surprise element. They've found themselves up a dark alley, and they're searching desperately for the best event, the best timing. And they might be thinking that people can come both for elections and carnival. Of course, reading about the visit, he said he met with stakeholders and that he wants to be fair to everybody. How much can be done in the next couple of weeks remaining before election? What would you like to see?
Well, as it relates to how the office is being manned, I have never been comfortable with having anyone who is aligned with any party, whether it is CCM or NRP, sitting in the seat. I think that office, but we're talking about for now, how we're going to get it fixed right now, that is not my problem. They're going to have to fix it. If they intended to fix it, they had ample time to fix it. We are talking about an election in August 5th, since August 5th. And I think everyone knew at that point in time that there's an election due in Nevis within less than a year. So I think that should have been given priority. And I don't think that it is a coincidence that it has not been given priority.
Bruce Golding, who headed the OAS Commission, which oversaw the elections, said that they have been writing the same thing in 2010, 2015, 2020, and they had to regurgitate the same in 2022. So you said they had ample time. The Prime Minister is 100 days in. The supervisor of elections was appointed November 1st, and so he's got 2 weeks in.
But you see, the thing is, and that's what I'm saying, they had ample time, because if the electoral office was an issue since before August 5th, and you want to be fair to the people of Nevis, that should have been something on your plate a couple of days after. And I don't think it should have been pushed back to this level. And this is crunch time, and the recommendations, like you say, are there, because I've read them, and they keep repeating things that could make us a better, for us to have a better system, electoral system in place, for the machinery to run fairer. And no one has heeded to, the recommendations that were made. No one has paid any attention to them. And I think that there are things that are doable. These are low-hanging fruits. I have not read anything in the recommendation that require any electoral reform to the extent that you cannot deliver a fair system for the people of Nevis in the short period of time. Because who you have sitting in the office who's going to tell somebody, oh, well, you have to come back in, tomorrow because the machine not working, or whatever excuses they normally would give, or whatever, some of the kind of stories I hear sometimes, I just don't, I can't, it's incredible the kind of things that you hear sometimes. So I don't know that it makes sense, and I think that for now, you can bring people from St. Kitts office to man Nevis office for it to be a fairer system, I think.
Well, they don't have an election for another 5 years.
Right. But they have people in St. Kitts who are trained on the ground who could run a local election in Nevis. There's nothing that says that you couldn't do that. And I think it would be favour to us if we can, because it's who you're going to appoint now. You're going to find somebody off the street and put them in the office to look about the lists and stuff like that without experience. That wouldn't seem like it make much sense to me. But I think that, like I said, it's one federation, it's one electoral system. I see no reason why you couldn't use officials from St. Kitts to conduct this election, because to leave us at the mercies of what we have right now is like going back pre-August 5th. And it's not fair to Nevis people. If it wasn't fair to St. Kitts Nevis at the time, it can't be fair to Nevis at this point in time.
I was listening to Observer Radio before I came here in Antigua. Listened to Dominica, TBS earlier today. All around the region, there's talk about fixed election dates. Our premier for 7 years was part of the Unity administration who said that. They had it encoded in their Charlestown Accord. Now, the same leader is trying at the 11th hour to find a space for the people of Nevis to execute the mandate. Where do you stand on fixed date elections?
Well, definitely, I think that would be a progressive move if you were to move to that. People ought to know what they're planning towards. It is not fair. It could never be fair that the incumbent walking around knowing when the election and making preparations in anticipation of when they're going to execute that, and no one else.
And telling people in New York when to get ready, but we don't know.
Right. So you always have the opposition at an unfair advantage. How could that be fair? How could that be fair in a democracy? Are we really upholding the principles of democracy? I don't think so. And to think that this is a lawyer by profession, I shudder to think what, a fisherman would have done. But we expected better. And I keep saying that is what we would have voted for. We voted for better, but better has not come. And it's now time for us to change. As simple as that. They have not delivered on most of the promises. You're talking about mandate. I don't think they care about that. It's just about making an impression now, like you're going Bath. I mean, what has really impacted the people in Bath? Is it just a road? In 15 years, you're delivering a vote for Bath in 15 years, and they should love you for that, But of course, we know that it doesn't, stay there. It must come with the other inducements, And I think that is, what I find so reprehensible about the whole thing, this idea of it's a confluence of things. A combination, sorry. It's a combination of things. We have bribery on the one hand, then we have the padding on the other hand, and it's just a whole machinery of ill will, working together, and that cannot be good for democracy. And so these people, if for no other reason, I think I want to see the back of CCM because they have not made Nevis a progressive place. And so going back to the original fixed date election, I think, would be a step in the right direction.
On Dominica, they said they have a population of 70,000 people, but the voters list has 73,000. It's amazing. We live in an amazing space in the Caribbean. So you started at the Electoral Office. Coincidentally, Oakland Peets, the new supervisor of elections, was on Nevis. Tell us about the march, rally, and I know you were not just protesting the Electoral Office, but lots of other deficiencies you see in the Vision Society.
Yes, that was the opportunity for us to at least highlight the things that were not going right, because we've been in touch with our people, and so we know what is hurting, and we know the issues that are hurting them, and so we wanted to bring that to the fore. And so we had people there from all walks of life, and people who had different interests, who were there to represent how they felt about different things. The people who had family members who would have succumbed to renal failure just because we do not have the facilities to the dialysis machines. We had to, and we would have spoken about that time and time again, about the two that the CCM government would have met there, and then they just let them rot. And then we would have spoken about the 167,000 US that the Premier would have received from the Taiwanese to establish their, to get us some new ones, which never happened either. So obviously, it seems that they're not minded to look after the business of the people as it relates to their health. That's why the hospital could be there, and there's no advancement, there's no progress on it, but it has just been sitting there and painted over, presented as if something is going to happen in anticipation of this grand opening. We don't know when, and it seemed like it would never happen. So you had people who had concerns about health issues. Inflation, again, is another issue. We're not saying that it is unique to our circumstances here in Nevis, in that only divisions are facing inflation. We know that that is a worldwide thing right now. The issue is, so what have we done? What has the being the policy response to what we are facing now. What has the NIA done to alleviate some of the pressures that have been brought to bear on families that are struggling? Recognizing that before the pandemic, because this is where, it's a cascade of activities, and we understand that it started even before the pandemic, before COVID. We already saw that Nevis was sliding, if you look at the budget addresses and over on the estimates, Nevis has been on a slide since 2015, thereabouts, and they've done nothing, to make sure that we rebound. It seems as if the activities have always just been focused on getting monies from last year just to squander, because it seems as if it has been just squandermania. And so getting back to the interests of the people. So inflation, they've done nothing, no policies to address inflation. At one point, we would have heard about him trying to remove taxes that we know that he didn't have the authority to remove, and so that never really happened. So it was just talk as usual, talk without any results, and so people continue to struggle. People were concerned about the 10% that the federal government had said that we should get across the board, St. Kitts and Nevis, when people in Bastia and Sandy Point and all over St. Kitts would have gotten their 10% to take home, and people in Nevis only got 5%.
Well, you said people in Nevis, they got theirs.
Yes.
The 3 representatives got theirs up to the point May 10th when they were fired.
There you go, and so Nevisions have been crying out, because Steve, in St. Kitts, the cost of living is lower than the cost of living in Nevis as it relates to basic goods and services. Yes, mind you, maybe you have some high-end things there that, but I'm just talking about the basics, that the average person would want. Maybe rent in some places in St. Kitts might be a little higher, than in Nevis, but generally, things in St. Kitts, let's maybe narrow down the argument to the cost of goods in the store, right? When you go to the supermarket, just because of the economies of scale, because St. Kitts has a bigger population and all that, things in the supermarket tend to be a little cheaper. So St. Kitts people, when they get $1, it stretches a little longer than somebody in Nevis. And when you look though at the politicians at that level, do you know that a politician in Nevis, his salary is higher than the politicians in St. Kitts?
And sometimes it's 2 times over.
Yes.
In the past.
Yes. So they acknowledge that cost of living is higher in Nevis. So they could rationalize and say, okay, this is why we are getting a higher salary, because cost of living higher in Nevis. But the average man in Nevis is not afforded that same opportunity to get at least on par with St. Kitts and increase, or a little more. It doesn't work. So who is representing who? And whose interests are being represented here? It seems to me like the interests of the politicians have always trumped the interests of our people. And it's about time that we change that. So that was one of the issues that people were marching against. So we had inflation, we had dialysis and healthcare generally. We had issues related to some roads. Some people in some places, there was a lady there, well, I don't think her sign necessarily represented, but that was her cause why she came. But she couldn't find one that was already done up for her circumstance. But she was there because where she's living, the roads have been in terrible or poor condition ever since, and there's never been any attempt made. And she's in the Churchground area, an area that has always favored, this present representative. And so people had a lot of issues, and so we came out. We're not fooled, and I think I would have made the statement, fooled by the fact that we got a temporary relief on the Neglect bill. And I was making the point, it's the first time, it's quite peculiar, first time I'm paying less for electricity than I paid for water. That makes sense?
I saw that. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. And when things don't make sense, you need to question them. But I recognize that it's just a temporary thing. It's just a feel-good thing before the election. And after the election, chances are, and so we must not give them that opportunity to return, to jack up the price again on Neglect, because I think we would have had a plan in place so that from the time that we would take office, you would get at least a 6-month reprieve on your electricity bill, and give us a chance to reset. Give us a chance to explore those other options as it relates to energy security in Nevis. And so that wasn't, not the biggest issue this week, because people tend to sometimes just think about the now without really projecting that, because we have still not yet solved the problem of fossil fuel and our dependence on it, that in a couple of months it's going to come back to bite us, or it is possible, because this war in Ukraine doesn't seem like it's going anytime soon.
No, it's intensifying.
Right, and so we have to be mindful of all that. Already we're hearing internationally that next year is projected to be a rough year for a lot of people. They're saying that inflation is going to get worse, and we probably would be in a recession. Well, when you look at what the textbook talk about recession, Nevis probably would have been in a recession for a long time now, and we're probably in a deep depression now, because nothing is going on. At one point I was hearing about MSR, but anyway, these are issues that we have. We have to keep. On the phone, we can't put it on the back burner. We have to keep it on the foreburners, and so we agitated about them this Friday gone, and it is likely that we would continue to, because no movement has been made, no policy changes. I don't know what would be revealed when he has his next press conference, if it is just talk, regular talk, or if there would be anything meaningful. I doubt it, because we haven't been able to get much substance from that clan, up to now, and it's not likely that we're going to get it now either.
One of the placards said, "End the corruption." The Premier has been on record as saying that he's happy that no corruption has been associated with his government. I expected that response, because when I heard it I laughed, and you laughed too. Why?
Well, obviously he's not going to admit that, but we see it. It is not even being covered nowadays. If you can't account for $500 million that you got from someplace, where did that money go? Start there. But the things that we see happen, the deals, the sweetheart deals here and there, you see people eating lobster every week, and some people are living high on the hog, and some people are just squanting. So we know that corruption exists right there. We've seen, we've heard, and mind you, I'm not going to be on the courthouse. I'm not going up the courthouse step to defend anything. All I'm saying is that Nevisians are well aware that corruption exists in the CCM administration. We've heard about deals that ministers are getting ahead of the business of the Nevisian people. Their business is being taken, When you take their business to cabinet, to federal cabinet, to see about securing their future and not the future of the Nevisians, you never took anything about the Charleston Accord to cabinet, but you're going to take all these things that are personal. Mind you, the revelations are coming out. I'm not going to repeat after anybody, because everybody is responsible for whatever stories they bring out. But if you listen to Patches, I'm not promoting this show either, but I'm just saying that these are people who are out there who obviously have insider information and are willing now to come to the fore and release. So all we have to do is just stay in tune. Like I said, I'm not repeating anybody after anybody, but I know that corruption exists. I can see it because I live here and I see it on a daily basis.
5 minutes after 9, we'll go to our first break in a moment. Of course, when we come back, we want to hear from you. 469-1616-1700. Maybe a frontline worker could call us and tell us whether they have received the long-awaited honorarium. Take a break and then we'll be right back.
But the economy is broken, the government stick, and the opposition come and take a seat. The debt is high and employment's low, and it's the poor people who taking the blow. I say we tired, we need a revolution. We just can't depend on vaccination. I say we tired, time to pick myself off the floor. Just remember, people matter more. So when you hear them talking bull on the radio,
Yes, we need to ask them whatever happened to that mantra that people mattered more. No longer the case. Dr. Bartlett, you've got some talking points for us. Roll it out.
Well, Steve, we're coming close to an election. We don't know when it's going to be called, but we are hearing the noise, the chatter on the other side, so we assume that it will be sometime soon.
So you're not ignoring the noise?
There's some noises that sometimes I can tolerate. Because you can always learn from a fool, I'm not calling anybody a fool, but I'm just saying I listen to everything, some things, I wouldn't go on in the Premier's post and listen to foolishness like that, but when, anything is in the media, then I would, official media, then I would pay attention. And so we've been hearing our people have been asking us about what are we going to do. And previous to now, we would have found, and I think one of my colleagues would have made a brilliant post about it today, about the copycats. What we would have found is that it seems as if they've already shut off their minds from any initiative that could benefit divisions. And so anytime we come up with an initiative and we make it public, soon thereafter there's some movement to do the exact same thing without much modification. They would implement, and own it, So it is now their idea, and then they would say NRP doesn't have any ideas to advance. We have not heard anything coming from the other side, and we know that that is their MO by now. We would have from experience, so we would have been speaking in generalities to a lot of things. So when people ask us questions, we've been very, and some people might have thought that we were being evasive. Not necessarily, but we were just discussing things generally. People who have an idea as to the things that we thought were wrong. But if I point out to you, let's say something wrong, chances are I'm in the position, I should have a plan to fix it. And that is a fair question. People have been asking, roll out your plans out of the line, but you can't do it prematurely. And so we haven't even seen them do anything about a plan. They're just starting to curse NRP because apparently that has worked in the past, just to fool people. So we've decided that there's some of us that have some peculiar competencies. Let me not call them peculiar, but competencies that, maybe, we don't necessarily share. So not that I'm an expert, but let me call myself the expert on this particular team in agriculture. And so I'm going to seek to address some of the issues that we have had in agriculture that have been plaguing the development of agriculture in Nevis, and for which we have not seen any movement to address these issues, to put us on a path to sustainable development in agriculture. So we know that there's tremendous potential for growth in agriculture. Because just last year in 2021, in St. Kitts Nevis, we would have imported $130.4 million worth of food and live animals. Just so do the maths. Every month, at least $10 million is being spent. On a small population like this, on importing stuff. So you can see if we were to move towards producing some of these stuff, then we would be in a better position in terms of retaining some of the monies here, and we would be in a better fiscal position overall as it relates to our trade with other places. And so we want to be able to exploit this potential, because we find that not enough has been done in agriculture to promote agriculture and to get us to that level of production and productivity that could benefit us in a good way. So, having recognized that I have a little more experience than other people, because our strategy is in the NRP is that you try to match people to their competency. It doesn't make any sense for us to stick where it says square pegs in round holes. We are not about to do that. So if that is your forte, then we give you the lead on it. So I've been given the honor of leading on agriculture.
Okay. And
so what we find, though, is that people have been using the word revolutionize quite loosely. We've heard, that the present Minister of Agriculture has revolutionized agriculture. I'm like, having had the experience in agriculture and the training, and I'm looking around to see anything that reflects, that. But is this far from that? So we know we have a lot of work to do as it relates to agriculture. So I'm going to deal with some of the challenges that we face in agriculture and Nevis in particular, that we may not necessarily face in St. Kitts, And people sometimes you have a discussion, and the first thing they want to know, what you all going to do about the monkeys? What you all going to do about the donkeys? What you all going to do about this? What you going to do about that? And the thing is, this present administration has been tackling this thing as if problems were just made to be eliminated. You know, they have not recognized the challenges that these things, these are issues. Not necessarily, not every problem is, or not every issue is a problem, but they have turned every issue into a problem and decided to, I'm going to eliminate it. So for the donkeys, they've gone on a donkey shooting spree. I mean, just going out and just shooting them, taking them out, and dumping them. I mean, that doesn't make sense. That is not productive. Or the people who are watching us, they don't take too kindly to it either. It's not the most humane thing to do. And so we don't want to take an approach like that. We want to look at the donkey issue as a challenge, and where you have the challenge, you have the potential for opportunities. There you go, opportunities. And so we are saying, you know what, let us listen to what our stakeholders have to say. And who are the stakeholders here? We have people like the drivers. You're driving at night, donkeys run out, your insurance, bam, your premium, goes up, everything goes up, The insurance companies, they have to pay high, payouts. Homeowners, as a homeowners, they have been crying out, what are y'all going to do about these donkeys? Because you're home, and apart from the noise, sometimes they break on your fence, they want water, they disrupt your sleep, they make a mess. Then you have the farmers. That is a big challenge for the farmers in particular. Because when people say, agriculture, most of the farmers, they have a challenge with donkeys, and then we're going to get to monkeys. So we have not only the crop farmers who complain, because donkeys, would eat their stuff, but the livestock farmers as well, because the donkeys are competing with the small stock and cattle as well. And then we have the issue of the environment, because donkeys sometimes graze a little low, and sometimes you have the pastures get denuded, and so you have erosion. And so this is not only these stakeholders' problem, but it is everybody's problem. So it's a government problem, so we have to fix it. So the opportunities for us, and we've said that one of the ways that we can address this is first to get a donkey sanctuary and make everybody happy. And the way we're going to make everybody happy, because this is a golden opportunity for us to be able to collaborate, between our stakeholders.
I've seen that in Bonnier.
Right, other places do it, and you seem like a more humane society, and you get help from other places and all that. So the homeowners, they let them continue to pay their taxes. And when they pay their taxes, we make sure that they get to a point where they don't even have to use money to pay for fencing, because we would have eliminated that problem. Well, not eliminated it, but we would have solved that, using the opportunity to establish a donkey, sanctuary. And so we wouldn't have them straying all over the place. You don't go to Simkits and see donkeys straying walking in Bastia, but you can come Nevis and see donkey walking in Charlestown, I don't know how many other places, developed places, progressive places that have their livestock walking to, Charlestown, but it happens here. So we are saying insurance companies, they have a stake in it as well, because they should be able to partner with us, give us, whatever assistance they can in terms of funding, so that they don't have to pay the high payouts when it comes to, damages that, they are covering. So we see tourism as well benefiting, because this is a place that you can go and you can start to name your donkeys and, put hats on them, and, the tourists visit those places. And of course, the environmental groups, the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs, we can get buy-in from them as well to, solve this problem. So we would like to, and take this to the bank, we would get the opportunity, establish a donkey sanctuary. You take all the donkeys, you put them behind a fenced area, and then you can control the population like that. Once you take them behind there, you can castrate all of the males, all of the females walk free, castrate all of the males, and anything outside, you castrate them, put them back inside, and so you control the breeding.
And there's
so you
also,
wouldn't have an overpopulation problem.
There would also be an opportunity for recreation.
Of course.
I know in Tobago, for instance, there's goat racing, and I think in Antigua as well. We just don't have to put them into the sanctuary, but we can have we don't have horse racing anymore at Indian Castle,
Well,
but
we're
we
thinking
can
about
have
reviving
donkey
that.
derbies.
Well, of course, that is an opportunity for someone, you know, to do that, right? But in addressing the issue, though, of donkeys being a nuisance and being a hindrance to developing agriculture, then the best course of action is to get them corralled in an area that they no longer pose a threat to agriculture. And so that is because, like I said, when you're talking about agriculture, the first thing is what you're going to do about the donkeys. All right? So we recognize that roaming animals, cattle, sheep, and goat, they also pose the same issue as the donkeys would, the same challenge to agriculture. And so we're going to have to make sure that our farmers get lands. Too often, agriculture has not been, you know, operating as if, you know, there's some pride of place for it, you know, so they have not given it. People have just been talking about agriculture, talking about food security and all the fancy words that, you know, they use, but they have not really been putting the money where the mouth is, you know, and so we think it's about time. What we have had is that we have not had a coherent land use policy for a long time, and so people have just been putting things anywhere, and we need to get to the point where we have an organized society, you know, we build sustainable communities and cities, because that is one of the sustainable development goals, you know, of the United Nations. And so we need to get on track with what is going on. We should not, and these ministers continue to do it just for votes and disrupt not only, well, we'll get to that at some other time, but, you know, they disrupt the flow of things and interactions between people as well when they do that. But the thing is, we need, like I said, a coherent land use policy where we know where everything is going to be. We know 10% of the land would be allocated to agriculture, and this is just, I'm just saying arbitrarily, just picking a number. Whatever portion of land that you say we're going to, you know, dedicate to agricultural activities, that's where it is. We identify the best place for it, based on, you know, the climate and all these other things, those other factors that we have to consider, and make sure that that is almost like written in stone, you know, because what has been happening is that people already can't get sometimes the financing to establish themselves, and then you establish, and then shortly thereafter some other activity comes and push agriculture aside. We have seen that. We have seen that over there close to the sea bridge, where agriculture over in the Caseby area, because that is a good prime area for agriculture, but tourism took precedence over that, and so housing and they push agriculture out. How much further can we push agriculture? You know, so we have to establish where we're going to have all these competing activities, allocate the spaces for them, and that is what a good land use policy ought to do. Make sure that our farmers get tenure, they can develop their land, whether they get a 100-year lease, and this ridiculous thing about farmers having to pay for lands by the month and pay some exorbitant prices. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so we're going to be done away with all that. You know, we discard that kind of practice because we have to be more progressive. We can no longer continue this kind of haphazard kind of development. It has to be something that is structured, and we must do that. I remember, if I can share an experience over in the Cherry Garden area, I remember a poultry farm was over there, and you had small ruminants over there as well. And then gradually, you know, housing was pushed, they kept pushing them out. So you go and you build in the middle of a paddock, and in the middle of a pasture, and then you complain about the scent of the animal, you complain about the noises of the animal, and then what? Agriculture get pushed away again. And not to any prescribed area that is definitively, you know, allocated for agriculture. You're tentative, and all farmers can be moving around like nomads. You know, that is something that we would have left in Africa. You know, they have a lot of lands for that. You know, so we have to make sure that we secure that.
Now, as you make that point, a friend of mine, I inquired about his animals. He used to have a lot of goats and sheep. And he said, man, I don't bother too much with that now. I said, why not? He used to graze in the area where Carina Limited is up at Hamilton. And he said, well, they took away the lands, and look at where Carina is today. So I mentioned the same Cherry Garden area you mentioned, because I know of some small stock owners raising animals over there. He said, man, they don't have enough land. We know it is a practice in Nevis where every morning the pens are opened and the animals, sheep and goats, simply just roam. They even tell farmers or people who own land that they must go and fence their land. Now, we had some very practical examples in Indian Castle and Madden. So school children, we went there for field trips. And what we found is that the animals would graze in a paddock, all fenced around, and then when that, suffered from overgrazing, they would move them elsewhere. Same thing happens at Madden's. But that was a government estate, 396 acres. Small farmers are having a lot of difficulty because they're not getting the acreage that they deserve. The environment is suffering, and so they take the line of least resistance and just let the animals roam. How are we going to fix that?
Right, so we're going to introduce semi-intensive livestock production. We're going to make sure that these farms are self-sustaining farms that have fodder banks that could, so you don't need as much acreage, for animals to roam and get their meat hard and all the rest of it, So that is something that we're serious about, establishing semi-intensive farming, livestock farming, because we just don't have enough land for everybody to let loose the animals. And we have to get to the point where we all coexist. No, you should not have nuisances. Your agricultural exploits should not, interfere with someone else's ability, to live a peaceful life on the piece of property that they would have bought. So these are the kind of things that we, when we introduce that kind of organized way of doing things, then we would eliminate those kind of conflicts between homeowners and people who are in, livestock rearing in that way. So semi-intensive farming, we're going to make sure that we establish semi-intensive farms. We have, there's a potential for people not only just produce the animal, but people who can produce forage. Like you have seen, I'm sure, you remember the days when Indian Castle used to produce hay. You cut your grass, so that could be a business. Somebody could be producing, food for animals. And of course, we have also to deal with the issue of monkeys. And that is a challenge primarily for the crop production. So I think that this present administration has done a little. Give them a little credit, for some of the initiative they might have taken up to this point as it relates to protected agriculture, in that they would have had some shade houses, and so we want to be able to at least increase that 100-fold. 100% increase on what we have now, because it's not enough, for the production, the scale of production that we need to undertake, and the potential that we have there, to exploit. We need to increase what we're doing as it relates to those spaces. Electric fence, I think, has been used for monkeys, to keep monkeys out. But the thing is, we have to get to the point where we create an area like a national park for monkeys, that they have an area that they can run free and they're protected.
Barbados.
That is higher in the higher elevations of Nevis. We can do that, without them having to, like I said, interact with and compete down on the flat, because we know that it was not always like this. When I was growing up, I had never seen a monkey except if you were to go in up higher. So we need that designation. We need a national park designation, and we are committed to doing that, so that we can have an area that is protected. Anything outside of that, then we would have to call, if they be found in residential areas, obviously, and in the areas that people are doing farming, that are not under protected agriculture. And of course, we must do some reforestation. That must be a part of the plan. We must be able to plant back some of the fruit trees that would have died out over time. When we were growing up, there are a lot of different type of trees that we know, fruit trees that we used to get fruits from. They're no longer there, and we have not done enough in terms of maintaining our forests, or at least improving on that, and so we are committed to reforestation. Then the issue of dog attacks on animals. People even sometimes people who try doing some semi-intensive farming, the fencing, they put up fencing, but dogs sometimes could leap some kind of heights. So we have to get to the point where people start taking responsibility for their dogs. And we have to have a update of the legislation. I know that a dog control act, we got that sometime in the late couple of years ago. There was some Yeah, I think a couple of years ago. I can't remember. It was 2019 or 2018. I think it was 2018. Yes. And so we have to operationalize that, meaning we have to bring it into operation. We just cannot just have an act and not have the legislation, the regulations, to decide how we're going to do what. So that is something that we must do, and we must establish a program, a dog control program.
But that can be done locally, or it has to be done in concert with the federal government. For instance, when we had the dog attack up in Gingerland, where a young child lost his life, the Attorney General responded right away. He made some posts about, I think, the same act you're referring to. Well, those, and more dealing with the big dogs, basically. But of course, there has to be some restructuring, some reorganizing of our laws if we are going to make that happen.
Of course, and the Nevis Island Assembly can make ordinances specific to once it's not conflicting with the Dog Act. Then we have that leeway. We can do that. So ordinances as it relates to how we're going to control dogs over here and all the rest of it, once it's not conflicting with the Parent Act. Dog licensing, people have not been licensing the dogs. People need to do that. And the thing is, the reason why we must insist on that is that the monies from that, we should put in a fund to be able to compensate people when they get losses. As it is now, if you were to license your dog, and if you were to, because right now it's not enforced, the money is going to the general fund, and that is used to pave roads.
Yeah.
So you have an animal, and let's say a dog attacks the animal, and that's your loss. You have to absorb that. That can't be fair, So if we were to do that, like I said, we make sure that we have a fund in place so that farmers, when they suffer loss, particularly small women and farmers, because they're more likely to than cattle, but whomever, if you were to, based on what is going on now, if we don't change the way we're doing business, it means that you're going to have a lot of conflict, and to avoid that, because when farmers suffer loss, then they go on and they indiscriminately poison everybody's dogs and all that. So we need to break that cycle, and I think it's about time that we put something in place. We've never done that. For years now, we've been grappling with the same issues, and I think it is about time. Once we get the opportunity for us to make sure that we put things in place so that everybody could be happy, everybody could be comfortable and share the space.
Now, obviously, you've had a long track record in the field of agriculture. And as you said, the party has been identifying where the skill sets are, and so you most likely in the new dispensation will be Minister of Agriculture. We've had a history of some ministers of agriculture having no track record in agriculture, and once they get that ministry, they appear to become an expert. Now, we've spoken in the financial sphere about having an economic council. Do you foresee yourself putting a team together which will guide the way we do agriculture on Nevis?
Well, obviously, I think an attempt was made, in all fairness, to the current NIA. I think an attempt was made, but I don't think it's very functional. But that is a consideration, that you need the guidance. I mean, maybe I would need it less so than the present administration, but definitely. But like I said, we're not going to put square pegs in round holes, and the competency lie here, and we should proceed that way. But if not, at least I'll still share the ideas, and be very vocal about it, and because we have to be progressive if we're going to make sure that agriculture thrives on Nevis, and we can all reap the benefits of that. We know that there are not a lot of crops that we can grow here that we have a competitive advantage of producing. If you're going to produce Irish potatoes, let's say, I mean, you can get Irish potatoes landed here for less than what we can produce it for. That is just the reality of the situation. And at this point in time, with WTO rules in place, you can't ban anything. You can't say, I'm going to produce potatoes, so I'm going to ban potatoes. Some company, you don't have that leverage. You can't do that. So we are going to have to look at some niche markets. And one that I think our leaders consistently been talking about is mango. Right? So there is an opportunity for us to market our mangoes, even in the fresh state. I have not been any place in this world, and I've been a lot of places, where I would have had a mango as sweet as a Amrapali.
No question about that.
I think that is the best eating mango.
Uh-huh.
We used to think when we were growing up, it used to be what we call the grafted mango or the Julie mango. But I don't want a Julie mango if Amrapali is in season. I would only eat a Julie mango now if I have no choice, if there's no Amrapali available. So I think that we can get a fresh fruit market going, but we're going to have to seek some technical assistance to get us there. Right now, we cannot meet the standards, the phytosanitary standards to get our mangoes into the US. But I know that there are other countries in the Caribbean who are exporting to the US, but they've gotten technical assistance in getting up the standards, getting to the standards that they have to. So we have to reach out to USAID and get that kind of assistance for us to be able to get on that level playing field, to be able to ourselves access that market. Because our people, and I can assure you that my sister in Florida would rather have an Amrapali than what she's getting now, coming from Costa Rica and Jamaica and Mexico
Panama.
and all over the world, you know. So we need to be able to get in there. And even in the UK, they do not have the same level of restrictions. So I see no reason why we have not explored that. But that is definitely something that we want to explore. Given the opportunity, that is something that we're going to explore. We must reduce the waste because we have a lot of wastes of mangoes. You know, when mango is in season, at some point, sometimes people are calling you, giving you a bag of mangoes, and I'm like, I had enough mangoes, even though I love Amrapali, there's only so much I could eat, you know. And so, but sometimes, a lot of times, they will tell you, well, this one kind of bruised up, you know. And I was like, well, I don't care when you know, once it's Amrapali, you know. And so, our fruits are not necessarily in the prime condition sometimes because most of the mature trees that we have, they're owned by older people, you know, and so. People have lost the skill of climbing, it seems, because young fellas don't climb now. You can't call a guy in the village, you know, to climb. Nobody know how to climb now. So we're at the point now, and I think I've been advocating that for the longest while, for us to get a mechanization in order for us to be able to do that. We need things like cherry pickers.
Okay.
You know, so that your mangoes don't get bruised up and all that. So that is something that we definitely have to make sure that we cash in on, because that is potentially, you know, a game changer for us, you know. I know that mangoes are seasonal, but when it is in season, you know, I think that we can capitalize on it and we can monetize it. That is the fancy word that they use nowadays.
Monetize, yeah.
Yes, everything is being monetized. Then, of course, we have soursop, you know. I have soursop growing in the wilds. You know, you can go in the wild and sometimes the big soursop, if monkeys don't get to it before you. You know, so there's a potential for that. There was some market hype within recent times that soursop have some medicinal, you know, value.
Good for the heart.
And I even saw somebody said, you know, about curing cancer and, you know, things like that. You know, we should be able to capitalize on that, you know. And so that is something that we want to create as a niche market as well, soursop. And then there's okra. I sometimes go in the supermarket and walk from one supermarket to the next sometimes just to find okra, because I have to have my cornmeal. My mother has put us on a schedule every Wednesday cornmeal. And I have not yet weaned myself from that, you know. And then sometimes it's a challenge. You go in the supermarket, you can't find okras, you know, and I usually go get the frozen ones anyway, you know, because once they're frozen and when they're fresh, you know, they're good. So I think that is an avenue for us to explore, and it is easy for us to grow. And I think that is one of the push that we're going to make. And of course, the mutton. We have been getting, and I remember when I was at the Ministry of Agriculture in Nevis, there was a request from Antigua. You can send 2,000 pounds of mutton every week. You know, there's a market for it. You know, it seems like on the reverse, we've been accepting mutton from overseas. You know, right? But we have the potential to produce it, and I think that we are going to explore that, because that is a potential, you know, game changer for us as well. Then we have the vexing issue, because I call it a vexing issue. I vex when I come in from St. Kitts on a boat and I can't see coconut trees along the coastline. That used to be Nevis. You know, that we have lost that. But apart from that, though, there's an economic part of it that we should be able to explore. I've gone to supermarket and seen a small bottle of coconut water for $12, and then the big bottle it used to be for $30-something. It must be up to $50-something now. Coconut water, you know, we used to take that for granted. You know, we have the potential to get back there, and I think there are other benefits that we can get from that as well. When we start talking about, we start trading in carbon, we'll discuss that in a different form. But What we would like to do, though, is to make sure that we establish each family has at least 6 coconut trees to start with, because they don't need a lot of space. Their space is up, they go up, they don't go out too wide. And so if we can start each family with at least 6 coconut trees, and then we plant along the coastline, I think we would have done Nevis one of the biggest favors in terms of re-establishing coconuts here in Nevis. And I think we were unique, because in St. Kitts we didn't see the same thing along the coastline. So I think that I've spoken to a lot of our people, and I think we want to get back there.
Just last weekend I was talking to a friend of mine. She's 98 years old. I go to her for all the stories about Nevis. And you must have heard about a gentleman called Wally Wade, who once owned the Pinnis Estate. He came from Montserrat, and according to reports of people who knew him, he was semi-illiterate, but nobody can fool him with money. He bought Pinnis Estate, and he said he thought he had bought an estate, but he ended up with a gold mine. The lady told me he had 2 boats, 2 schooners, one called Morning Prince and the other called Evening Princess, and that they went down the island selling Nevisian copra. In fact, in 1962, a company called Nevisota, of course, a bit before our time, but you listen to these stories from the older people. That whole estate, Pinnis Estate, was a cash cow for this gentleman and the people of Nevis. And of course, you're talking about the aesthetics, restoring Nevis. When she told me the story, I went and found a picture. The coconut trees on Pinnis Beach were so thick, but one of the most beautiful sights, especially when approaching the island from St. Kitts.
Yep. Yeah, and I long to see that re-established, and so that is going to be one of our goals, and we're serious about re-establishing that. And then, of course, we come to non-food agriculture. We have been talking about having a crop that we can get foreign exchange, because we can't continue with the CBI thinking that we can just be munching off of St. Kitts with the CBI. Some people don't like to hear that, but we must be able to establish something here that we can stand on our own, and there's a potential. And we have said, even before this new generation of NRP candidates, they were talking about the potential that was there for us to explore as it relates to cannabis, establishing a cannabis industry, And of course, we know that they had some, federal implications. And so we want to make sure that we push that as foreign exchange earner for Nevis. We have to make sure that we start doing the education. We must have a program, of educating our people as to the best practices in that industry. We must get the investments in, and of course, we must have an empowerment program for our people. It can't be somebody from outside come in and take it over, and we just end up being the ones in the field, who plowing and picking and stuff like that. So that is something that we're going to move forward, given the opportunity.
How about Nevis honey? He was my neighbor for years, Quentin Henderson, the bee man. And I remember how proud he was. He came to Nevis in 1988. And I know how proud he was when he was able to stock that little gubby bear of Nevis honey.
Yes.
On the shelves of Superfood, Williams Supermarket. He went off to places like Montserrat and Simbat to help them start their beekeeping industry there. You cannot find Nevis honey, and that's a very important part of our diet.
Yes.
Any plans on how we could resuscitate that?
Well, of course, we would engage our people who are in honey production. There's still some people who are I know of people who are actively doing it. They have some challenges that relates to the health of the bees, and so we're going to have to get some technical assistance for that, because I don't think that we've had anybody, an expert in that field for a while attached to the agriculture department. People who are on the island who would have learned from the bee man, they would have been trying to fill in. But I think that is something we definitely would want to improve on. But people are still producing honey, not to the extent.
Well, I know a
they
few,
used to.
but sometimes for months they can't lay hand on it.
Yeah, the bees have had some health issues. Yes.
Why would something like tomatoes, lettuce, I've tried to get my hand on both, for the last 2 weekends, and I couldn't. There's no local tomatoes,
Really?
and only one person with local lettuce. Why would that be causing challenges?
I think it's the way we are doing business. We continue to do business the same way we used to do business. Everybody want to do a little this and a little of that. But what our plan would be is for us to introduce guaranteed markets. And so we're going to have something we call contract farming for farmers. So what that means is that if we identify a few products, we say tomatoes. We should never be out of tomatoes. There's no excuse for it, because tomatoes could be grown. It's not something that necessarily is seasonal. Once you have protected agriculture, you can continue to produce. It's the same thing with lettuce. So once you have a guaranteed market, you're assigned to each individual who wants to be a player in the market in terms of the production, a certain amount that you would collect, because you have the market already established. And their business is just to produce. The problem has been that the same man who produces is the same man who has to go out and seek a market. And so because it's a small marketplace, he just has, his activities are limited to what he himself can market. And so sometimes that's what happens. And so somebody over on the other side, they decide, boy, this month I don't feel like doing anything. Or maybe they got a job at 4 seasons, a seasonal thing. But our agriculture can depend on how a man feel at the time. So we must have a structure in place, and it must be done as a business. It must be a commercial enterprise. And so when we say we're doing contract farming, it means that it's something that's organized. We have producers and we have people who are going to market. And so we establish whichever families, we can even extend it to families, because if you have small plots here and there, or small greenhouses in the villages, and you can reap it like that, once the system is in place. But it requires some coordination. So that's why we're going to have to get a handle on the financing of farming and stuff like that we have as a part of the plan. I think I may have inadvertently skipped over that part, because that was also identified as a challenge. The challenge that farmers do not have ready access to credit. And so they just limit their activities based on what their pockets could support as it relates to the inputs. So if your pocket tells you that you can only buy 1 pack of seeds, then you're going to only plant, a small amount. But if we were to take that responsibility off of the farmer, just let him focus on producing. And in contract farming, you would give him everything that he needs, as well as technical assistance. So if his crop is coming along poorly, at least you have the technician who would go and examine and say, well, okay, what you need to do, you need to increase on your nitrogen or your potassium or whatever is lacking. Those kind of things, they do that kind of work. And so all the farmer has to do is just produce. He just puts his hand and say, I am willing to produce. I have the experience in maybe a backyard doing tomatoes, and some people say, well, I have green thumbs, I can grow almost anything. And so you select people and you make sure that there's a constant supply, but there's not been any coordination in that regard in agriculture, we should have been better off than that, because at some point we had crop forecasting and we had a system in place. Daniel Atherton could tell you that when he was there, agriculture was more progressive than it is now. With all the new technologies that have been introduced, we are not in any better position today than we were then, because you should not, in this day and age, still be complaining about something that seemed to be seasonal, that is not really a seasonal crop. You should be able to get lettuce all year round. You should be able to get tomatoes all year long, cucumbers. You should be able to get those things. But like I said, it's about us trying to organize and making sure that the inputs are available to our farmers, and don't put that stress on them, because those are limitations. So this concept of doing contract farming, I think, is a concept that we're going to have to push in order for us to maximize our productivity as well as our production.
Now, you've spoken about organization and coordination. I'll hold it there because we've got our first caller of the evening. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Good evening, Steve. How are you?
I'm very well.
And good evening to Canada, Pat Bartlett.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good, and I'm even better listening to you. because you touched on something there about contract farming, which I think is so absolutely important if we're going to have serious commercial farming. But I want to bring both of you back to the Four Seasons when it was open. And remember that under the NRP government, we organized farmers to produce a few items like lettuce and tomatoes and so on. And we also had a marketing component involved. And we also use staggering, whereby you don't produce, or everybody don't produce the same crop at the same time, but you stagger it so that the crops keep on maturing at a different time, so you have supplies throughout the year. I'm just saying that to say that your idea it's more than an idea. Your plan is an excellent one, and I want you to promote it, to repeat it wherever you go, to the farmers and so on, because they have experienced it before. But they got help from the Extension Service, the Agriculture Department, and there was a marketing component. And it was agreed that Four Seasons would buy the supplies rather than import them. So there was a contract between the government and the Four Seasons for the government to provide food via the farmers. Excellent plan. Talk about it, and I hope you get the opportunity to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. That's one.
Sorry, man, it's Joseph Perry. I'm not afraid.
No, we know who it is. Your voice is very recognizable, and you're very sound.
Yes, well, I'll go back to listening.
Thank you for
I'm
calling.
glad that he had an appreciation as to just the way the system worked.
Yeah,
Because some people they don't care to learn, and so it's good that Mr. Parry really, he understands the concept. And
but
yes.
sorry, you were going on to something? I wanted to interject something.
Well, only thing is that like I said, we need to resolve the issues as it relates to farmers' access to credit. We need to get to the point where we can have zero interest loans for farming. Because we can't burden our farmers with commercial interest loans. Other countries give their farmers subsidies, in order for them to be able to get to the point that they could, secure themselves with food. Food security is a serious business, and I don't think that we are taking it as seriously as we ought to. At this point, we should still sometimes I go to the supermarket and I'm just trying to find something that is from Nevis, and I can hardly find anything, But we must be competitive in some things, Obviously, there's some things that we would not be competitive in. It doesn't make any sense for you to beat your head over with that one. Focus on the things that we are good at producing, and I think that we could become competitive. But like I said, we must take the stress off of our farmers. We must get our farmers to the point that they're doing commercial farming, and I think that we should offer training in agriculture free. We should pay for our agriculturists. Make sure that they go out. I've interacted with people out there, and they came to school, to vet school, mind you, because they want to because they're going to be a vet on their farm, their family farm. So I think we need to take some of this stress off of government as well, and give people the potential to make money. Give the private enterprises, the potential to make money. And so zero interest loans for farming, I think that is, not that I think, that it would be one of our plans. I keep saying I think, but these are going to be our plans. Of course, we're going to refine as we go along, because as we interact with people more and more, there are things that we would have to fine tune, obviously. And then the terms of payment must be at the intervals to coincide with harvesting. It doesn't make any sense for you to put a farmer on a monthly schedule of payment when he's not turning over his business like that, because he has 3 months before his earliest maturing crop comes in. And so, well, barring lettuce and stuff like that. But if you understand where I'm going with this, and I'm sure that the listening audience probably would as well.
I was getting to the point because what you're outlining calls for organization and coordination
and planning
which is Mr. Parry, the former premier who called in, talked about the program when the Four Seasons opened, and said that the program was supported by a battery of extension officers. You mentioned Daniel Atherton. He was one of them. What I've been hearing over the years is that the farmers feel that the extension officers are in direct competition with them. How are you going to get around that?
Steve, I want to get to the point. I cannot be, I wanted to get to the point where everybody is comfortable at their level of production. That's why I said to you, contract farming takes away all that. You're not competing with them. You have already secured for yourself, based on your ability to produce. You have already secured for yourself an income. So you don't have to worry about what someone else is doing.
Okay.
That would take away that out of the whole dynamic, And so I would push this. I would continue to push this because I think that is forward thinking. I would also want the people who are training now. Government doesn't have to absorb all these people. You should get these people trained and come back and establish their own farms. Not come back just to be on government thing and 8 to 4, they have to be there 8 to 4. We're losing, capacity here, productive capacity. When people spend time sitting down in the office, sometimes they go out in the morning and come back and nothing else to do for the rest of the day. Mind you, our level of productivity is not as high as it could be. And we need to make sure that we are a little more efficient in the way we do things. So sending off people now to study agriculture, I think, should be with an aim to get them come back and start their own farms. We need to have our own grace and get to the point where we can, do processing, at that level. For us to still be having these little things between farmers who are just producing some small amount of things, that is counterproductive. You have to get everybody in a comfortable space based on their abilities. And so I don't see it necessarily as a competition. It ought not to be a competition. As it is now, maybe it seems like that because sometimes farmers get frustrated for other reasons. They can't get their things sold because everybody's selling the same thing at the same time. And so we can get along that.
And getting the young people out there and making sure that they get into farming when they get back would ensure that we have younger farmers. Most of our farmers are getting on in age.
Definitely. And then I think one of the other advantages, I think, though, maybe that the people who come back and are working for government, they have that salary that could use as an input base, and I think that maybe that is not, available to the current farmers. And so all over the world, you're going, people, who are getting into, agricultural exploits are getting younger. Only here, some of us think that to get into agriculture is beneath us, it has something to do with our mindset, I think. But I think we are well positioned to take advantage of the opportunities, that exists in agriculture, because just based on what I would have said at the beginning, about the $130 million in 2021 alone that we would have spent just on food in imports. I think that the potential is there for us to create our own, millionaires here.
6 minutes to 10, and you're listening to incoming Minister of Agriculture et al., Dr. Patricia Bartlett. What else you've got to share with us in the remaining 6 minutes or so?
Well, we're not going to be able to get into the et al. At this point, because I really wanted to explore the housing and the thoughts that we're having as it relates to housing and developing sustainable cities and communities, because whatever we do, it is in the context of the sustainable development goals. There is such a thing that I've been trying to preach to our people, that we have 17 sustainable development goals out there by the United Nations, and it's about time that we adopted all of them full scale. We have not done much, and we are lagging behind in these achievements, and these are just goals that would promote prosperity for all. These are basic goals that would make sure that we can live together harmoniously and not injure the environment in reaping what is ours. So I want to continue on the housing thing, but we don't have a lot of time, but just to briefly, at least highlight the thoughts at this point in time. Of course, we have been talking about making smart homes. We don't want to be doing what we have done in the past and call it a revolution, because I can't understand something that started 20 years ago and you're still doing the same thing the same way and you call it a housing revolution. That doesn't make any sense to me. That is, fooling people as usual. So what we want to do is to make sure, because we've heard within recent times people are getting homes and the proper infrastructure is not there. It sounds to me like we're building homes in the wrong places. we are building homes in the wrong places.
Well, you did talk about zoning.
Yes.
Which we seem to.
Why are you
to
going
run away
to drop
from.
some houses in a pasture that has no roads, doesn't have electricity?
Case
and-
in point.
Well, right now I was hearing that over in the Cherry Garden area just above,
Chimney Crescent, I think it's
well,
called.
the
something
fancy
like that.
name that it is called, somebody already started to pay mortgage and couldn't move in because electricity was not available. Mind you, we ought to have infrastructure in place before you you get to that point. But I'm just saying that to say that these inconveniences, we ought to eliminate them. So when we assume office, these are things that we must take into consideration, because we cannot continue to stress our people unnecessarily, and that is unnecessary stress. Stop going in the middle of a pasture and dropping things, because when you do that, people are going to start soon to complain about the cattle that are making noise and the sheep and the scent of the poultry and all that, you know. So we need to make sure that we get that streamlined, and I think we already spoken to that at the beginning.
Have you considered that might be part of social engineering? Those in Cherry Garden and, well, Chimney Crescent increases the numbers in St. John's. Those in Madden's increases the numbers in St. James.
Yes.
But poor Eric Evelyn can't get 6 houses down at Rice's.
Yes, so it's
They've
all
cleaned
about
the ground, and it has grown over 3 times. They've cleaned it on 3 occasions, and it's now all clogged up again.
Yeah, but it is all about vote getting, and I'm not going to be a part of any administration that just focuses on our continuity in government and not about the business of the people and the best interests of the people. I would not be dropping a home any place that it is not needed. It's unfair to people, and sometimes you're moving people from one area that they grew up in, that they
Breaking up families and
and they have support structure in place already to take them to some place far away that they don't have, and extra stress on, and these are people who are not necessarily in the highest income bracket, and so we have to make sure that we eliminate that kind of, because the objective is wrong. The goal is for us to build sustainable cities, and that is for people development. At the end of the day, it's all about the people. And so we are thinking about making sure that the homes are smart homes. And when we say smart homes, they say in this day and age, if you're going to give someone an affordable house, it means that they should have at least some photo cells on the house so they can at least save some energy. Yes? They can produce enough electricity in their homes, and whatever excess they can sell it in the grid, because we're talking about people in the low income bracket. And so those are the kind of houses that we want to be able to build, and not only about the concerns about renewable energy, but we're thinking about communal water. We have all these small homes usually in a scheme, and they have not outfitted them with any water catchment. And so if we can get as a collective, we can get the water from all the roofs and channel it into one storage space for that small community, then we'll be able to at least alleviate the plight of the homeowners, in terms of being able to get water to water the garden and different things like that at a cheaper rate. We are thinking about income property investments, because we have people in the diaspora who really would want to come home eventually. And in the meantime, every year, it gets more expensive.
1 minute.
1 minute left? Okay. Well,
Leave
like
it
I
or
said,
not.
we're not going to have enough time.
Well, we can always come back and we'll talk housing.
Yes, we'll have to probably do that. So I would just like to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. It was a pleasure being here, and time just flies when you're here. And thank Mr. Parry for our lone caller. I know people listen, and it is, I encourage people to
They were in
continue to
rapt
listen.
attention because you provided some good information tonight, and I know they're listening. Never mind just the one caller.
Oh no, I'm not putting up by that at all. I'm just yes, but I'm hoping that sometime soon I'll be able to come back, and because housing is an issue for some people, so we'll be able to continue the conversation at some point. So I would just like to take the opportunity to say to all the viewers and the listeners, have a pleasant night's rest. Peace.
And like Obama says, don't gloat, vote. Is that what he said? I know he stuck his finger up and said, vote. Don't worry about anything else. Listen to the people who are bringing good programs to improve your life.
Can I just invite people to come tomorrow night to the town hall meeting that we're having in Brownhill tomorrow night? We're going to be at the Maisie Bartlett Community Center in Brownhill. I'm inviting everyone out. We can expound more on the issues that I didn't get to tonight and let the people in St. John's in particular know what the plans are that we have for St. John's. So bring your ideas tomorrow night and let us have a conversation at the Maisie Bartlett Community Center at 7 p.m.
36 square miles is all we've got. We can't afford for it to be used randomly. We've got to start zoning and doing things in a more sensible manner. That's been our program. Our guest has been Dr. Patricia Bartlett. As I said to you, she's usually surgical, and indeed she was. Good night, and join us again next week.
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Board